Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today we are working on our John Deere 757 Ztrak, and what I'm in the process of doing is rebuilding the deck. This machine's got about 1,300 hours on it, original spindles, original idler pulleys, so I am replacing the idler pulleys. I'm going to pull the spindles out and rebuild the spindles rather than purchase new ones, just put new bearings and seals in them. Mine are still spinning freely, but I am getting some groaning. If I grease them up, they'll be nice and quiet for, while I'm cutting the lawn. By the time I get to my next cut, I'll be starting to hear a little noise and rattling again. So hopefully nothing's really chewed up inside. We'll find out when we take them apart. I'm also going to remove the mule pulley in the back, and we're going to go ahead and rebuild that. Now that, if you look up on the schematics, the bearings that John Deere used to sell for them are no longer available. You can only buy a complete mule pulley with bearings installed. But the bearing number is still available, and I did get a set of bearings online. So we are going to just replace the bearings in it and see how it goes. When you consider that the bearings cost about 30 bucks for the pair and a brand new mule pulley is about $260, I'll take my gamble on the bearings and give it a try. All said, for all the idler pulleys, all the bearings, all the seals, it's about a $340 job to do every single one on the whole deck. And that will have everything brand new and ready to roll. A new spindle, one new spindle for this deck is similar to the mule pulley, about $240, $260, right in that ballpark, depending on where you get it from. So this video is going to be on the rebuilding of the spindle, how you go about rebuilding the spindle. And so I'm going to go ahead and get started, and we'll be back. Okay, so got all three idlers replaced. Okay, now I've seen a few videos where guys are using parts they're ordering off of Amazon. Pulleys, you can match them up online. You can match the part numbers up online, including the bearings and seals. I honestly don't know whether it's worth it or not. I opted not to. I ordered the idler pulleys, bearings and seals off of Amazon. Got the idler pulleys. None of them fit right. None of them fit on the tensioning pulley. Just couldn't fit right. You couldn't tighten the bolt up without it jamming the idler pulley up. So I just decided, heck with it. I returned all of them. The only bearings from online that I kept were the two bearings for the bearing numbers for the mule pulley, just because you can't even get those through John Deere anymore. So like I said, for 30 bucks, I'll take my gamble with that. So anyway, I have the idler pulleys changed, pulled my blades off. Now I'm going to go ahead and unbolt the spindles, and then we will work on disassembling them. This machine used to have a debris collection system on it, so there is an extra pulley up top here, which I am going to go ahead and remove. I have no need for that at this stage of the game. I don't have the debris collection unit, so I'm just going to take that pulley off. That won't be going back on when we reassemble it. Okay. Have the first spindle out. This covers on the underside, right where your blade attaches. There are little tabs. You have to just pry them up slightly. That'll allow it to release off of the sleeve there, and you'll be able to pop it up. You'll be able to tap those back down to set it back on. But you can see there is going to be some mess in here. If you've been greasing regularly, you definitely should have plenty of grease escaping out the bottom. You will find when you take the spindle off, it will be caked in a combination of grease and clippings and dust. So I'm going to clean this up a little bit, and then we'll take the nut off there, and that will allow us to take the pulley off and disassemble, take the shaft out, and then we'll be able to pop the seals and the bearings out. Okay, so cap is in the parts washer. Wipe this down a bit. As you can see, looks like I got a little chunk out of the housing here. When I take this apart, I'm gonna clean this up real good, make sure I don't see any cracks. I think this will be okay to use for right now, but I'll see as I go. I may need to just replace this spindle altogether. But next step is going to be take this nut off, and then we'll be able to actually disassemble the spindle. So let me get us set up to go ahead and do that, and then we'll go ahead and video that. Okay, so it's a 30mm nut. We're going to pop that on there. Now let's see if we can. Okay, nut, spacer, and it's a tooth spacer, so it fits right on there. You'll see there's actually teeth on the shaft there, and the pulley comes off, and the pulley as well is indexed, splined, so to speak, to fit onto there. And I'm gonna flip these over, and right as I take them apart, then we have a cover. This will clean up. Now we should be able to just give this a little tap and knock this right through. There's going to be a washer here that should come out, and then it should slide right out of the housing. It is going to be full of grease and will have to be cleaned up. So let me just grab a mallet to give that a tap. Borrow the original nut so I'm not hitting the grease fitting. And there you have it. Okay, so yes, there is a spacer, big thick spacer up top here. This is on the top end. You can see the bearing in there. There is a spacer in between the bearings in there that you're going to have to work around when you're popping these out. And then there's a seal right here. This seal, I believe, is the bigger hole on the top, and on the bottom is smaller, or vice. Actually, it's the smaller hole. There are two different size seals. One with a smaller hole, and that's on top. And on the bottom is the bigger one. And again, you can see the bearing in there. You can see on the shaft of the spindle, there is another spacer here. Okay, so we're going to clean all this up and start tapping these out. I'm going to clean this up a bit so that I can hopefully get this on video, how you tap these out. Okay, to get these out, just going to use a punch, and you're going to be able to reach down in here. Get the spacer, move the spacer aside. You should be able to tap it right out and just go side to side. As you can see, the seal's already popped out, and it looks like the bearing is just about released. So there's our seal. And now I just got to slide the bearing down. Okay. Gonna have to raise that up just a little bit. Okay, just got a socket that was big enough for that bearing to fit in. This is pretty much almost all the way out. There we go. And as you can see, the spacer that goes between the two bearings came out. There's our bearing. And then now we'll just pop out the other bearing and seal, and then we'll get that housing all cleaned up. Okay, quick flip over, tap, a couple taps, and the upper seal and bearing is out. So what we're going to do is go ahead and going to go ahead and clean up the housing and clean up the spacer that's there. Then we'll get all our parts together and start putting everything back in. As you can see, there's a lip in the housing where the bearing is going to set down on. Whoops, a little slippery there on both ends. So, going to clean that out. Going to clean up the outside of it a bit in the parts washer. And we'll go ahead and be back in a few minutes. Okay, so got our housing cleaned up. Good enough for government work there. Obviously, tried to get the majority of the grease and sludge out of there. And we were now going to go ahead and place these bearings in. Here are the new bearings. And these are from John Deere. Like I said, I mean, I've seen people ordering them off of Amazon. They're definitely cheaper. These bearings, let me see. Theirs were only 13 bucks a piece, so they really weren't a whole lot cheaper. They were, you know, you'd save a couple bucks per bearing. And I honestly don't know if there's any difference. I've read online that these are what they call a C4 bearing. And most of the ones I was seeing online are a C3 bearing. And that has something to do with the tolerances, where I guess they leave just a little bit of play in these bearings so that when they heat up, because they spin at such a high RPM, then they don't get as hot. I honestly don't know a whole lot about that. It was just some things that I had read online. Like I said, I'm sure you could try it if you wanted to, but I opted to just go with John Deere bearings. So I'm going to go ahead and pack both of these bearings. I'm just going to pack them with some red and tacky. And then we're going to go ahead and, just like you would any other time you're setting a bearing, you're going to tap these in right down to where they lock into place. And then this is the blade end, which will then take this seal, which is the one with the bigger hole, as you can see. They're both the same diameter, but the inside opening, the ID inside, is bigger on this one. This one goes on the blade end, just like so. And then the other one goes on the other side, which would be the one that sticks up through the deck where your lock nut is and the grease nipple. So I'm going to go ahead and get these packed. I'm going to tap in this side, tap the bearing in. We'll come back once we have these packed and ready to put in. Okay, bearings are packed with grease, and then you spin them around a bit, make sure the grease is all worked into the bearings there. And now I have a 38 millimeter socket here. It will fit nice and pretty much perfect on there. So I'm going to go ahead and tap these in. These you definitely shouldn't need a press to put these in. These are not that tight of bearings. So I mean, they fit in there, but they shouldn't be a press fit. I mean, I was able to tap them right out with a hammer. So I'm going to go ahead and tap this one in, and then we'll show it to you before we put the seal in. Okay, that one tapped right in. So next thing I'm going to do is put the seal in. And that goes in. Let me double check. Make sure we have that correctly. Yes. All right. So if you look at this seal, it's a little harder than the other one. On the upper side, you can see exactly which side goes in. You see this one, your standard seal, where you would kind of fill where that spring is to lock it with some grease, make sure that stays in there. This one, you can see you still have that. I'm going to put some grease in there, but then you kind of have this other lip here. Because it's so thin, it can be a little deceiving. So it's going to go with that very small inner groove going into the bearing. So we're going to pack that with a little grease, and we're going to put some grease around this lip here so that when the bushing goes in that you put in on this end, it'll be, everything will be locked right, everything will move smoothly and won't bind up. And then we should be able to use the same socket to go ahead and tap that right in. Okay, so we've got the bearing and seal successfully installed on this end. Now on this side, we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to tap this bearing in. And like I mentioned before, now this is the top. This is going to get the one with the smaller opening. Almost made a crucial mistake and almost left out a really good point. The next one, when you put the bearing in, you first have to put this sleeve that goes in between the bearings in. Then you put your second bearing in. Okay, so you have to put that sleeve in there, otherwise you're gonna be making a mistake like I almost made. I was just about ready to tap this in and totally realized that I had left a piece out. So now we're going to go ahead and get that tapped in. Okay, so once you get that bearing set, the sleeve will have a little bit of space in it. You should be able to wiggle it around. It shouldn't be tight in there to the point where you can't move it. It should be snug. It doesn't flop too around, but you can slide it side to side. Okay, now we're going to get the seal put in. Okay, so we got our seal all ready to go in. Greased up through the back, so I'm going to go ahead and tap that in, and then we'll be able to reassemble it. All right, so new bearings and seals are in. Everything spins nice and free, moves nice and freely. Now we are going to go ahead and reassemble our spindle. This is obviously the bottom where our blade attaches. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put some grease right on here. This is going to be sliding into the seal. This is like the larger bushing that we took out. This one's obviously built into the shaft. And then when you come up to where it's going into the seal, just make sure you spin it as you slide it in. There we go. Now we can set that on there. Now, you're going to see, I was mentioning before that these are splined, and you see there's even a double spline right there. There is a double spline on the shaft. I should have showed you before I put it together, but I'll show you right there. So that's going to, essentially everything is going to key together. This bushing, see these two holes? This is going to allow for grease in that to come in. This is going to go in first. I'm going to put some grease on the outside of this, just so that this slides in. All right, so that's going to go right into there. Then we have, our shield for the upper. Then our pulley, and same thing, the pulley is keyed, so it's only going to go on one way. Then we have it's like a washer or bushing or spacer, same thing, it's keyed only one way. There we go. And that goes in there. And then we have our nut. And that will thread right down to lock it together. And now I'm just going to give it a bump with the gun. I don't know the torque spec on this. I'm going to have to look it up. Okay, everything spins nice and free. And then lastly, We have our cover that goes on here. And this, I'm going to just tap on. Make sure these tabs are pushed down. And that's it. Moves nice and smooth. I'm going to pump a bunch of grease into it. Okay, pump that full of grease. Like I said, spins nice and free. I mean, it's nice and solid, but spins real smooth. No binding, no sounds. Put our bolt back in for now. Now I just got to go ahead and remount it in the machine. And that is it. That is all there is to rebuilding the spindle. I have to tell you, it's very simple to do. I'd say that if I wasn't videotaping it, it probably would take me about 20 minutes total. Definitely, I think worth it if you're looking to save some money. You know, you can either go to your John Deere dealership and order the seals and bearings. Or you can look online and get the parts and order them online. Like I said, whether you order John Deere parts or whether you go with aftermarket ones, I guess that's completely up to you. I can't say that I'm disappointed with how these John Deere parts fit. They popped right in, worked fine. In hindsight, maybe I should have left this off and greased it first, because then I could have waited till I saw the grease pushing through the other bearing. But I have an electric grease gun, and I probably did about 16, 18 pumps in there, just to make sure that it fills in all around that sleeve, and then obviously it will get greased in the spring when I use it. So that concludes it. That's how you go ahead and rebuild these spindles. I hope this helps anyone. If you have any comments or suggestions, please feel free to leave them below. If you like what we're doing, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.